My cat is going to start singing, so.
Okay, well, we are live now. Hi, everyone. It's Sarithkin in Ontier, and I'm here with Duke Edward Gray of Lochleven. I think I pronounced that right, of the East, who has reigned three times in the East.
That's correct.
All right. So I usually start these with your origin story, but first I want to thank you for agreeing to do this with me. But it's been very interesting for me to talk to so many people, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you. So origin story.
All right. Well, I'll start out with a thank you first, just because when COVID hit, you and a bunch of other people stepped up. So that's awesome. Thank you. Origin story. So I was a teenager, and would go by the state fair and see a couple guys dressed up in funny stuff. Right. This was back in Fairbanks, Alaska, so we're at the Winter's Gate. Went to college, found a LARP group, did that for a bunch of years, and then went to Penzic 25 was my first war. Ahead of that, my first SCA experience was sewing Mistress Anne into a dress, and then going to a Great Northeastern War, then the big show at Penzic. And I got there and said, I'll come back when I can fight. So that, and then we started fighting. We fought for Penzic 27.
So you weren't in Ortha for very long?
So I grew up there, and then went to college, and then got married, and well, she hasn't gone far since. So.
Okay. So tell me about discovering the fighting and what spoke to you.
Well, so my parents met in judo, and so I had an awareness of martial arts from that experience, and we did a LARP that was based on an SCA fight mechanic, and did that for a bunch of years. I'd done some martial arts in college, and so the fighting draw was definitely the draw, and the LARP experience was a good one as well, in terms of both provide an opportunity to be your best self and to practice doing that, which isn't something we necessarily always practice on the 9 to 5. And so those are the kinds of things that I went after.
Okay. And did you start out Sword and Shield?
Yeah. I did a bunch of axe and shields in a LARP. I realized that didn't translate quite the way. So yeah, I was a sword and board monster kite from back in the day, even through my first crown. But we have a tradition out here in the north part of the kingdom, the northern region. Our founding fathers, if you will, were Farrell, Tirlock, and Randall, and they believed in weapons depth. So by a matter of pride, that I can make my way around the field most things.
Okay. So your first Penzic, you didn't have your armor together, right?
No. Okay. I could not get anybody to loan me armor ahead of that Penzic. So it was actually 2 years before I came back at Penzic 27 that we'd started fighting in the spring, April. I bought a few things that first Penzic that I certainly couldn't make, and then Lucan put together an order of I can't remember the guy's name, bunch of helms.
So who were your mentors then?
So we were an odd crew, Lochleven. So that's my household. And so there were 8 of us our first Penzic. By and large, we were all LARP transplants. So at Penzic, it's a war, right? By Penzic, we each knew how to throw 2 or 3 shots, and we ran around as a unit until one of those 2 or 3 shots opened up, and then we kept going if they didn't, and we did pretty good for a bunch of noobs. We had a whole lot of melee experience from a LARP that transitioned well in terms of battlefield awareness, cohesion, and finding the angles. So that was really one of our strengths coming in.
Okay. So you said Lucan helped you get your armor together. Was there some crossover from your household over to his?
Yeah, so the person that got myself and my lady involved was Mistress Ann, who's in his house. Um, and so but the primary armoring contact we had was Baron Pierre, or not Baron, is Baron? Yeah, Baron Pierre from the next barony over taught a friend of Joseph and myself how to make pickle barrel armor a couple years prior. And then we leveraged that to get list legal. Um, and yeah, that was mostly us Joseph and I come from WPI, so we're both engineers. So we both figured out how to make stuff work, not necessarily right or great, but get on the field. So that was how we got that. And then Billy Fish would hire us as mercs for Lucan for a bunch of years. Come by and drop off a case of beer and go from there.
Well, cool. So were you squired to someone then?
So I did not get squired for a long time. We were trying to make self-made men for quite a bit, but I ended up squiring to now Duke Sir Griffith. So Randy's little brother, as he's sometimes called. He loves the hell out of that.
And how did you hook up with him?
So local fight practice. So this is out in Carolingia, the Brandeis fight practice. He was there in training, and so where I'm at, so I'm outside of the greater Boston area, but at that time, the people that were training that were active, Lucan was active, Griffith was active in our practice, Torvald was active, but a little ways away, and so that was a piece of it. And then the attitudes worked, and so I worked with him for a while, and then was squired to him just as he was winning his first crown tournament.
How was that for you? Did you get totally submerged into the world of retinue?
Oh yeah. No, so he and my squire brother, who'd known each other for ages, were his two squires, and yeah, we were there half the time, right? Half, 3/4 of the time we were there, and I was his squire. I was Her Majesty's armored champ, and it was definitely one of those showcase moments, and I was glad to both be ready and aware and use the opportunity.
When you're her champion, is that an appointed position?
Right. So yeah, so we have tournaments for each set of champions, and one will be selected by victory, and the other will be appointed, and they go back and forth for even measure. In this case, I was appointed by her.
Okay.
And I did good enough to not embarrass her in that appointment.
So tell me about wanting to be a self-made man. Like what was that, and what changed your mind?
So the part of that was, one of our issues coming in was we got to see how bad SCA politics can be from afar, and we decided that was not going to be part of our DNA. And so we did our very best to be removed from politics. So we would show up to events, we would play, wave and make nice to everybody and get out of Dodge. Now, there's a downside to that, in that we didn't necessarily contribute a whole lot to making stuff occur, right? Which is and so our first case of politics was, Your Highness, you've won Crown Tournament, you can't be apolitical anymore, right? That's not an option. But that was where that mindset had come from. But you get to a point and you realize, a more detailed coaching, finishing school, if nothing else, right, to get across the goal line, to make that next level was important, right? And figuring out who the right person was, et cetera. But that was what was going on in my head at the time.
Okay. So was your sparring really more about how to get well-rounded and less about like teaching you to fight?
So I mean, there was so there are pieces that, I mean, Griffith is definitely, so it was a bunch of everything. I mean,
Okay.
so certainly being the King Squire, you saw a lot of the kingdom, right? And you saw a lot what was going on, right? So that part certainly came out of that experience. I realized I needed to develop an art form a little bit, and I developed some knife making at the time, which of course let slide for other priorities. Um, but there was very much the martial finishing school to it. In the East, we tend to talk a lot about getting the suck out of your fighting, right? Find the mistake, isolate it, right? This is Sean. It's a different the way Sean says it, but it's the same thing.
It's a lot of what His Grace Sven from Anstioria says too. Let's suck less. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You don't it's high praise around here.
That's funny because it's a negative, right? But yeah. So because you LARPed before you found the SDA, did you always know you wanted to be a knight?
So yeah, I mean the title, I mean, so when I started the SCA, yes, right, that was clearly the mindset direction in this context. And I made that accolade in that LARP game, which of course is a different,
Right.
game, right? The thing that I was fortunate to learn in grade school, we had a principal, we had a small, grew outside of South Alaska, the class was like 13 kids, right? And the coach was also the cross country ski instructor. So that was what I did generally for athletics coming up. And because he didn't, he didn't have money for training or whatnot, right? He used the older kids to teach the younger kids. And part of that mantra was the young kids are always looking up to the older kids. So whether you like it or not, you're an example. And so I learned early on and it was, ingrained, what kind of example do you want to be? And so that I was aware of from an early age and attempt to be the example I would like people to follow.
And that's sort of like a lifelong quest, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about the skills that transferred over from the LARP that you did before. How do you think it helped and what transferred?
So the biggest transfer, well, there are a couple of things that transfer. One is reading body language, right? You've got an opponent, you've got to assess what's looking at you, what's going to come, what are your options. So that transferred well. Locations, that was all the same. Obviously the power levels didn't. They were certainly different, but the physical controls were the same. The big boon from that was on a melee field, the tactical awareness. So in the East, we're a war kingdom because Penzek, right?
Right.
You've heard that from all the Eastern dukes, from all the middle dukes, right? You've heard that left, right, and center. But a lot of people will get 10, 50, 100 melee engagements in a year. We would get 500, 1,000 in a weekend, right? And so you would see each different side, the timing, all of those things you see over and over and over again, and mastery is about doing it over and over and over again, right? So that was the big thing that came through, because the basic combat mechanics were the same, right? We were a touch system, arm, legs, dead, right? And so how momentum mattered, how you develop momentum is different, but how that snowballs into victory is the same.
Okay. Um, in yeah, I don't think some of us on the West Coast appreciate pins, like how big of a deal Pinsick is for you guys. Because when I talked to Brennan, like I was floored that right after he won Crown, he was on the phone negotiating Pinsick. So I
All
don't
the
think,
weekend I was in Atlanta.
yeah, yeah, it's interesting, very interesting for us that are outside of that culture. But anyway, so how long from getting Squire did it take you to get knighted?
So I was knighted. I was knighted 10 years in. My Squire track was a year because
Right,
I'd front loaded that system.
right. And what kind of training were you doing during that 10-year time frame?
So the what I was primarily doing was I was primarily going to multiple practices a week and training on the weekends. And then with Griff, I spent a little bit more time breaking my stuff down and putting a little more focus into it. I'm a little, so you interviewed Brian. I'm a little bit more like him in terms of I didn't do a lot of Pell work. Um, what I will use a Pell for is to go through a motion sequence and try to validate the motion. Um, if I'm finding I've got an issue with it, I can break it down there because it's going to take the feedback. But I'm not the guy that does 1,000 shots, 100 shots. You know, that's not who I am. I do a lot of back of the brain churning on what happened the last time. Did you? I think you commented that you saw my YouTube on mental focus,
Yeah,
and that was 6 months of just back brain thinking about it,
right.
finding that headspace, and so that was a so so just for anybody else who's trying to learn what the F I did, right? I'd go to a practice, I would win some, I'd lose some, take notes about what I did right, where I had problems with, and then try to tear apart how I screwed up, what were better options, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I find amazing today is the number of impressive teachers that are out there telling you how to do it right and how to examine stuff. That is, I wish I had that back in the day.
Yeah.
For,
When you're working on the Pell to validate emotion, what is your process?
so usually the first thing I do is anytime I'm looking at a Pell, right, it's the bad guy, right? It's the opponent. It's the guy you're going to go through. And so it's the before, right? Before I'm in measure, set sequence, there he is. All right, where am I relative to my opponent? Make the step in, make the contact. I'm doing this at the first time at light power and just working form, trying to double check range, angles, make sure that makes some sense, double check footwork, position, am I where I wanted to end? And then I'll ramp up in speed into full power to make sure that that is all legit. Check if I'm off balance, check if my placement is varied from where I want it to be. Look for any of those deficiencies in that track or cycle. And after I've made the shot, if it's the shot that I'm making, what is the recover out of it? What is the angle? What is the position? What is the range? I'm often taller than my opponent, so I'm often either test sniping or counter punching and doing a range change up. I taught my knight while I was a squire to stop chasing me. I'd snipe him, right? That would get him to run. I'd back out, and then on his second shot, I'd jump in because often people's guards will deteriorate in that chase, right? The first couple they've got together, and then it goes apart.
Right.
And
It's just sort of natural that it would. Yeah. Um, Can you, I know that you're very tall because I've fought you at an adult swim, but can you tell everybody else how tall you are?
I'm a hair under 6'3".
Okay.
So one of the funny stories was a Great Western a few years ago, and Al-Anon moved out there, out to Aidenville, right? And so I spend my Saturday to get my butt kicked by people like him, and then we got the Rose Train the next day, and the final five, four of them, three of them are taller than I am, and one's a Thanaric who's a couple inches shorter than I am. You know, a Thanaric, right? Big boy. But that that day before reminded me how the angles change, right? And that I'm always a fan of the opportunity to do fine tuning, right? You show up to war, you play with a couple things, find some guys, let them kick your butt, figure out how and why, make your adjustments, and then you're polished and ready.
Have you always kept a fighting journal, and do you still keep one?
I go in and out of that. The thing the thing my chemistry teacher told me that stuck with me is, in class, it was his mission to make sure that anything he said that was important went through your head about 3 times. So he'd say it, he'd write it down, you'd watch him write it down, you'd write it down, right? You think, and so that is the thing that is most important in that, is it goes through your head one more time, right? And so when I'm not writing it down, I'm trying to make sure I'm thinking about it. And so I should be more formal than I am. I go in and out of that phase, but that is the point.
I think that's natural. One of the ways that when I forget my notebook, I'll repeat back what they said to them, just so that I'd be like, did I get that right? And then they'll repeat back, and then that's 3 times. So but I have that 3 times thing too. You know, they'll tell me, I'll write it down, and then I'll actually type it in. It is, and it works. It really does work. So that's a good tip. So on your path to knighthood, what do you think was the hardest thing for you to master? Or
I'll tell you I'm not sure, but I'll tell you one of the early lessons that I was glad to have learned early. There was I haven't said this publicly before. Penzic's a big thing. Making the unbelt team is a big thing when you're up and coming, right? And so there was the year that Colin, my later to become squire brother, but a member of my household for friends forever from that LARP days. He made the team the first year, and I didn't, right? And I spent, right up to the moment of alternates, trying to make it onto that team, and I spent so much time and activity and effort trying to get the nod that I was not able to be happy for my squire brother, right? Support the team, be happy with myself, right? That was just a venomous circle that went round and round and round and round. But it let me get over and done with worrying about other people's expectation of whether or not I'd made a threshold. And making that, year 3 in armor as opposed to right before I'm getting knighted was a much better time to learn that lesson.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
You're going to get acknowledged when you get acknowledged. You've got no control over that. What you've got control over is how good you get, how hard you work.
Right. And that's sort of like a microcosm of like the whole angst people get sometimes when other people get knighted and they think they're fighting better than those people, and they're like, why not me? And it's easy to say once you're a knight to say, you know, everybody's path is different, you know, just be happy for your friends and keep going. And, you know, there isn't a limited number of belts. You know, it's sort of different for you because there is a limited number of people on that team. But no, there's another team next year, right? But it's sort of a hard thing to wrap your head around when you are so goal focused. So I think that's a really important lesson you learned early. And did it translate to your path as well?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That was one of the harder lessons to have learned. And I was very glad that I was able to have learned it. Right, the one occurrence was enough. Like, yep, that was a bad choice. I'm done with that choice.
Yeah, it's a lot of wasted energy too, when you could just be focusing on getting better.
Yeah, it was nothing but negativity and self-poison.
So tell me about your knighting. Were you put on vigil?
Yeah, so I was. So a little bit of a funny story. So it was our 12th night. My knight had just stepped down. It was the next reign. And I had, being apolitical as I tried to be, right? I didn't generally go to 12th nights. But Evalder, who was in my household, was getting his OTC. It was our terminal kingdom fighting award, and I had the medallion, as a household medallion. But I was kind of sick that day, and was on the fence as to whether or not I was going to go. I get there. It's in Connecticut, which is a little south of us. I arrive. My nice household's setting up a pavilion. Our son's with us. I'm trying to remember, he's 6 at the time. He was relatively young. And they're setting up right in front of the entry door because we're going to a school, because that's what's available. And my wife is able to tell me that she's going to help set up, so that I don't have to help set up, because I'm crying out loud, I'm going to help set up, right? I'm going to take care of the boy long enough for him to set up. And my squire brother and my knight had run around trying to find some snow. But they got stopped by the cops asking, "What are you doing?" Piling snow in the back of a truck.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was kind of humorous.
So
yeah, good day.
So were you knighted on that day, or was it a vigil?
Yeah. So there was a vigil during the day, and then knighted later in court. So I was sent out first thing, and then
Okay. And vigils in the East, is it knights only that give you advice, or is it open?
Yep. So this is a conversation with you and your peer. In the case of my peer, it was peers only in my household at a little bit of time at the very end.
Okay.
At the time, we had so when we started out, we were all a bunch of nobodies. We had gathered to us a couple Laurel/Pelicans, and my knight, but I was the first peer from the initial group.
Okay.
And that, of course, has ballooned from there.
As it does. Okay. What kind of regalia did you get? Do you have any legacy regalia or family regalia?
So the big thing was the nightly shift from my knight's household, and then that began the lineage of my household's nightly shift for that ceremony.
And shift, you mean tunic, right?
Yes, a white.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And it has, so it's a simple white shift. Ours has a white on white oak tree with bare roots, which is our basic heraldry, and then has the coat of arms of all the knights in the lineage.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. So they had planned this for you. So a lot of people had known for a long time.
Yep. Not my wife.
Not your wife, though. Okay. I was going to say, she keeps a good secret. Yeah. So on your way to getting knighted, were you fighting crowns? Is that culturally acceptable in the East?
Yeah. So I actually, so when we started, so I went to Penzic 25 with my wife as a guest to Lady Ann, now Mistress Ann. And we got back, and my friends from LARP shanghaied us and said, "We're going to start a household right." And I was,
Right.
um, and so one of the things that I believed from that time, right, was that if anybody in the group was going to be able to be king, I was that guy. That was the thing I could. So everybody in our household's got their different strengths. I am not the public speaker in the crew, um, but having the skill set to win a crown tournament was something that I thought I had. And so that's what I worked on for a long time.
Okay.
And so I practiced going to crown tournament before I had an AOA and any thoughts of ever being able to.
Okay. And so tell me about that, because I think that's really interesting that you, from an early time, knew that that's what you were practicing to do. Because I think a lot of people, at least on the West Coast, because Crown is just sort of culturally everyone fights in it, they just sort of go through the motions and they're not actually intentionally
Right.
getting the lessons.
Yeah. So there's, what do I want to say? So obviously from the time I started fighting crowns to the time I won my first crown, there was definitely different things I was trying to learn. Right. Right. And so the first thing that I, paid attention to is, I was a cross country skier, right? So the best way to get good at cross country skiing is to
Cross country ski.
ski, right? So the best way to practice to win a crown tournament is to try to win a crown tournament, right? And so that was my starting point. Now, obviously, there's, right. Everybody's talked about whether or not you get butterflies, learn to deal with that. There's learning to put your opponent down. There's, for the, at the time that I won my first crown tournament, to my knight actually made the cultural change in our kingdom. But yeah, we were doing best 2 out of 3 tournaments, bracketed tournaments. And so the easiest way to win a crown tournament was win all your fights, right? The losers list is hard to go through, right? And so the mentality of the crown puts somebody in the list opposite you, it is your job to put them down, right? That is a mindset. And so that was before I won my first crown, the thing I was very focused on doing, right? A piece of that was, at the Penzic prior, I was finding, people of note, and I was going to do pickups, but I was going to make sure I put them down the first pass, right? It wasn't going to be play around, put them down. We'll do 5 more. Somebody entirely out of the blue, you put them down, right? I found Duke Edward Stomsky out of Aitenveld across the field, and that's how it went, and we both won our crowns. All right.
That's cool.
On the throne that time too. But, yeah.
So was that a mentality you really had to cultivate, or did that come easy for you?
So it was something I had to cultivate. So something I've told a friend, this was the beginning of our Laurels versus Pelicans fundraiser, which we did for a few times. But it came out of knights and dukes have pecking orders, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've told her, right, is there are a predominant number of type A personality dukes out there. Why is that? Well, you have to have a requisite level of self-confidence / ego to take a list and say, I am better than you and I'm going to prove it, right? Because that's what the contest is. It's not, well, I'm going to be a nice guy today. I'll let you win, right? That subtext can't be playing in your mind when you're in a crownless tournament. I play it, you're in my list, you're going down. That's the way it is. And I don't like to rub somebody else's nose in it, but that's the time to no, I got no room for you.
Right.
And so it is. So I mean, when I'm in my crown mode, I'm not talking to people. I'm not being social because I'm not in a friendly mindset.
Right.
My knight fought his best from when he's got a grin ear to ear. Oh crap! Look out! Right, that's his best game.
People talk about that a lot, and I think that it's kind of a weird conversation to have because people talk about how there's hubris or arrogance in being able to be a duke, and I think it's really more about confidence, like you said, and I love the quote that like there's a thin line between confidence and arrogance. Like confidence smiles and arrogance smirks. So I like to keep that close because I think you do need something that's almost, to arrogance, but not cross over.
You have, so I see this more in Melee only because I have more opportunities to say it in that context. Whenever I look across at an opponent, regardless of how many of them there are, the question you have to ask yourself is not whether or not you're going to win. The question you have to ask yourself is how will you win? What is your path to victory? And then have enough confidence that you are going to be able to attempt to execute that path to your best, right? What
I
does
like
that
that.
And so, and particularly as a warlord, I've used that a whole bunch because you're outnumbered, right? People give up. There's no way, and you've got to slap that down. And then when you pull that upset, you go, all right, guys,
Right.
who's stepping, right? Right? There's no victory in kicking the crap out of somebody out number 3-1, right? There's nothing there. But you turn that around, there's something to talk about.
Yeah.
And that gives you something to work on, right? You fall short, sure, absolutely. But there was a path there. There was a thing you could have done that would have gotten you victory. Now you can work on that.
Right. And you took the risk to take the path, right? Like you didn't lose before you began, right? Yeah. So tell me about your tourney day ritual. You say you don't talk to people when you're ready to win.
Yeah. So I'm an introvert. I realize that there are thresholds for introvert, and there are levers that you can I'm just across the threshold. I can flip into extrovert, but for me, it's about my headspace. It's about, okay, am I ready? What am I prepared to do? What am I going to do? And so, the first day I won, I was in the best headspace of my life in terms of fighting. So Lucan, we're in the parking lot I'm in my Under Armour, cycling an hour or two before things get started. And Lucan, who's won a bunch of them at this point, right? Says, block for me. And I said, I was sir. I looked back and said, if you block for me, deadpan. Like, that's a set of balls I didn't realize I had that before that day.
Nice.
But so it'll be about some slow warm up and just get into the motion. Sometimes we'll do some slow work with a guy. That day just kept getting faster and faster and faster and faster throughout the tournament. Tighter and tighter, 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 more and more power. But I'll go out, I'll do my job, I'll go back, isolate as best I can, My last crown that I fought in won. I had been sick 2 weeks before, and on the Friday before, I woke up and started coughing, and it all came out.
Oh,
So that was like an improvement, right?
right.
But, but of course, my endurance wasn't great, right? So, and I lost my first 2 fights, and we had switched to a pool format. So we had so you qualify into the Sweet 16.
Okay.
I lost my first 2 fights, which almost had me out of the tournament, and gassed myself in my third fight, right? And so and we're in this open space, and so I'm in a chair with my head down, hydrating, eating a little this or that. My consort's keeping people the F away from me, going outside, doing slow paces, trying to get my head working, understanding what do I got to go do. And then poor Pilon was my next fight, and I blew him up because I reminded myself, what do we got to do, right? And refound that mindset. Um, that was a long, hard slog.
So how did you discover that, like maybe going outside and being alone and not having anyone talk to you was the way that you needed to get to the right mindset?
So right, so the crown tournament before I won, um, I was entirely loopy. I mean, I lost to a guy that I put away in 3 strokes a crown tournament before. Um, for the first time in my life, I killed the guy without realizing I'd thrown the shot. Right, we were in the list. He started to move. He fell down. The sword bounced back in my hand. I went, huh, I must have done that because there ain't nobody else here. Right. But I was just all over the place. And so the next weekend, I call in my knight. I call in his big brother, Duke Randall. I call in my consort. I got my wife, and we were just talking about headspace and what a different headspaces look like. And in that video, I go through much of that. And so it was a matter of trying to figure out, okay, from where do I work best? And then finding that how to get there and leaving yourself that trail of breadcrumbs to and from that. And so if you don't know where that headspace is for you, right, you may need some outside input, somebody you work with to observe and give you some feedback. But understand that most people fight different depending upon their emotional state. Are you dead calm zen? Are you excited? Are you happy? Are you mad? And if you're mad, you gotta understand anger issues, right? You can't hurt people, right? Are you protective? There are a lot of, and everybody's going to identify to these differently, and it's going to affect their fighting differently. But if you can get some feedback in terms of how that affects your fighting, that can inform where you want to be from a headspace perspective. And then the exercise is to find that headspace quickly. And if it's not a headspace you want to be around people in, figuring out how to drop it relatively quickly.
Did you find that going after those pickups at Penzic and other places where you said, this first fight I'm going to drop the person and then, then we can fight friendly, did that help you find out how to get that headspace when you needed it?
Absolutely. That was so just like you run laps, right? It's the same thing. It's attempting to do a thing over and over and over until it becomes second nature. And it's not quite instinct second nature, but it's close. I still have to manually set the switch.
Okay. So tell me about winning your first crown. What was the most surprising thing about reigning?
So I was fortunate in being a squire during a reign to realize that, okay, from that close position, I probably saw half of what goes into it, right? And the other half was going to be an entire surprise, whatever the heck it was going to be. And that was pretty true, pretty accurate. What was surprising? I don't know, but one of the truths that I will say from that is the person of the crown is there. There are two people that make up the person of the crown, both the person representing the crown and the audience viewing the crown, right? Everybody who is there is superimposing their fantasy over what you are doing, right? What do they want to believe? What are they predisposed to believe? And I will often say, if you don't step on your, your people will generally give you the benefit of the doubt. Because why are we doing this thing?
Right.
Because we want to see Arthur on the throne, right? And if you give us half a chance to believe you're close, we're in.
Right.
Don't screw it up for us, right?
Right. Okay. What was your favorite part?
I mean, so coming from a LARP, the romantic ideals in the broader sense, not just the boy-girl thing, right? The broader magic that happens under moonlight kind of thing was always a big deal to us. So shtick was a big deal to us. But so Pennsic being the event that it is, right? So on Thursday at noontime, I look to my wife and say, "See you, end of war," essentially, because then I'm on the move. So, sorry. My wife allowed me to fight for her my very first crown tournament, and that was it.
Okay.
She knew from day one she wanted nothing to do with the office, right? She did not want to be the crown. So I've always fought for friends.
Okay.
So at that point, we stopped hanging out at Pennsic, and I was being crown all the time, right? And just was focused on that job. But Wednesday is Midnight Madness, so there was like a 6-hour block between noon and 6, between lunch and court, where I had some time off, and so we went walking to the court, walking through the shops, and we're outside the bookstore, and there's this gal who I don't know. She's with two of the folks. She bows, and these guys clearly don't appear to be Scadians. Pennsic's got a lot of people, right, from all walks of play. And the quote, I've finally forgotten the quote. All right, so this is the man that we fight for, right? And the way she said it was so clear that she got the dream, what we were aspiring for, and that quick little phrase. It was all I could do to hold it together long enough to nod, take her hand, and get my wife out of there before I just, the tears start flowing, right? And I mean, even now, it's been 10, 11 years, and they're still here, right? And that's as clear-eyed as I've ever been able to tell that story. And we walked back to the camp because that was presentable as I could be. But she got it, right? She got why we dress up, why we have a crown, and that's awesome.
Yeah. So fighting for your friends, what role do they as consort play for you on tourney day?
Yeah, so it's been an evolving role as we get more and more practice. I'm pretty sure Maggie got to be my consort twice, and I'm pretty sure Thora got to be my consort 3 times. Yes, I think that is correct. And so it's been that. So Thora's a small little firecracker when she wants to be, and her ability to get some of the evil eye and back up. I know you want to come and be friendly right now, but this is not the time. Right. It's pretty impressive when she pulls that card. And so, but also, just checking cautiously, carefully, Do you need anything? Hydration, food, what kind? Making that buffer space, being an ear and deciding whether or not to interject a word or two. But also, of course, this is a varying degree thing, whether or not to make sure that I get full attention before I step into the list, right? And that's if there's a consort out there looking for a thing to do that they don't know what to do, that is a major thing, right? The number of fighters that hurry into the list, because right, I mean everybody's waiting on them, right?
Right.
And you can't. The moment you step into that list, you had best be prepared to deliver, stand and deliver, right? If you are trying to sort that headspace thing out while the marshal's asking if you're ready, you're behind the curve, right? He knows how to put you down, and he's going to, unless you're prepared to deal with it, right?
Yeah, one of the things that somebody told me once that I've really taken to heart is that you don't have to ever rush. You're in charge of the pace of not just the fight part, but the whole thing, right? Like
Yep.
they're calling you and you'd be like, yeah, I'm here. I'm putting my helmet on, no big deal. So you don't have to let other people dictate that it's an emergency when it's not, right?
Right. And dictates the important thing, right? This is supposed to be your fight.
Right.
You need to be dictating its terms.
Right.
And so its terms start with whether or not you finish that drink in your hand,
right.
Whether or not you're cleared the sweat from your brow, your helmet's on, you haven't, your gear all fits appropriately, nothing's half tied on or whatever the heck. And the moment you step across into the list, you've done so in your terms. Where you stand in that list, you often have a great deal of discretion, right? Standing in the corner is a good place to die.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because you don't have to get dictated to. You're dictating, and you don't have to be a dick about it. But
Right.
right, you can be polite about it, and it can't even be a big deal. It's just sort of like, I need a little extra time to do this. Is that okay? And who's gonna say no, right? Like, so yeah, I think that is huge. That is huge, to understand that you're dictating the pace of the whole day. It's not just when you're in the Eric and they call lay on. It's the whole day. You dictate what you need to do.
Yep.
I love that.
And remember that it's part of that confidence thing, right? You don't want to be an arrogant ass about it.
Right.
But you need to be, right? The crown has called you, so proceed with all due diligence. However, this is your fight. You have to be confident to take the time that's required for you to fight your fight.
Right. And you have to feel ready, and you have to take what you need to feel ready. Yeah, I love that. That is great. So you've reigned 3 times. Was there something you wanted to do the 3rd time?
Oh, I'm trying to remember how that led in.
No judgment. I mean,
I
reigned 17 times. I don't care. I just
no. I didn't. I had a good advisor, Jane, who has since passed, was provided good counsel many years ago, in that while many crowns have an agenda, that's the one important agenda for a crown, is to serve the people.
Right.
Anything beyond that is secondary. And so I haven't had, the way I approached it is, are we still having fun doing this? Are we still burnt out? Yes, no. Do we want to do another one? And that was kind of the way that the discussion developed. Yeah.
Okay. What is your favorite tradition in the East?
Oh goodness, you asked this one and I remember. Oh yes, that was where I went. So Kenrick and Avelina were contemporaries of mine, and they instituted the toy box.
Yeah, that is a good.
And right, you've heard the Velociraptors from Brennan, right? That's right. Yeah, but so that was beautiful to see. The one minor contribution I got to make to that was that the first time Kenrick had come up short in 5 crowns, where he'd been the Admiral of Armies as our second place finisher in our crown list.
Okay.
Right, and so he'd finished second 5 times, and I was the guy he beat to win it the first time. And I put him in the losers list, and then he came on fire, and then I back and forth, but I was not on fire that day, and he won it. But their daughter Ellie, who's now in college, was the same age as my son Liam, and the shtick that they were running with was their daughter would be their heir, right? And come on. And
Great.
so she needed a guard, and they asked if my son would be the captain of her guard.
Aw.
Right. Yep. Right. And so they were a Saxon Rain, and so I'm here, Dad, thinking about going, well, by God, if my son's going to be in this guard, these guards are going to have weapons, right? And so made a bunch of little wooden saxes and axes, and right, and they populated the toy box. They went out at coronation, and so yeah, it was just cute kids, right?
Yeah.
Little Spain helmets and lamellar armor. It was cute stuff.
I'm all for anything that integrates and makes it fun for our next generation. Just 100% behind it. So, well, we're almost at an hour. So is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to talk about?
Oh, goodness. I think I've hit the things that I care most about. I mean,
Okay.
the only other thing that I care a lot about is, this is worth saying. The in the SCA, a lot of us, particularly as we're coming up, get siloed off into these little different subgroups, right? Whether it's your shire, barony, household, kingdom, what have you, it's easy enough to get into an us versus them mindset mentality. And I would certainly urge anybody that sees the guy across the field as a them to go spend some time with them. Go travel, go find other people, because this happens because they're here, right? We're all here. We're all part of the same game. That's the biggest thing. We had a crown who got whomped at Penzik because we didn't have allies. And well, I guess I should go travel and get allies, right? Because it's the one positive thing you can do about it, right?
Right. Interesting. Did I remind you to bring your stick?
You didn't, but I came prepared.
Okay, great.
So I brought, because I'm an engineer, I brought a few different things.
Okay.
This is what I fought with the longest, right? It's this one's like a 40-incher.
That's super long.
Yeah. So I mean, for the longest time, I fought between like 40.5 and even 42-inch long sticks that were 1 3/8 plus. This one's 38 with a tip on it. I've got a unbalanced basket hilt only because when I was laying my hand over, the basket hilt and my gauntlet were contending, and my metatarsals were the ones that were going to lose that fight. And so I got an altered grip on that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is your basket hilt lined in leather?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So
what does that do for you?
So when my hand bounces against the grill,
okay,
it takes some of that force off.
Okay.
So and as tall as I am, I'm not a beefy guy, and those bones are right there at the surface. The one other thing that I do with even my short swords is I put a nylon webbing on the blade, and that goes both sides, right? Because I'll blow them up, but the webbing, the physics of it, right, is the force goes in the webbing, but there's a discontinuity between the webbing and the rattan, and there's a reflection of that interface. So you put a lot of that force comes back out at you, and so it'll tear up the strapping tape, and so the webbing will come loose, and it'll stop working. But it keeps you from, before that happens, and so you go back and tape it down. Before that happens, it keeps the rattan from breaking. It keeps you from breaking the skin of the rattan, so the stick lasts a lot longer. I can fight with a stick for 6 months competitively, and then practice for another 6 months before I have to throw it away.
I love that. I like that you explained the physics to me. That makes a lot of sense.
While at a very different scale, you talk about, well, never mind, I'll say that later. We talk about artillery shells and cement bunkers is the same kind of thing. You'll get a small damage when the back wall breaks out. It's because the pressure waves reflected to the back end, and concrete sucks in tension, and so it comes apart.
Interesting. Huh. All right. Well, let's do the final 10 then. I've changed this up a little bit because I think you're number 64, and it's time for some new questions. So what event have you never been to that you would like to go to?
So the ones that I've heard great things about have been Petrea War, West Ontario War, Sport of Kings.
Okay. Come out to Sport of Kings next year.
Yep. The one that I went last time. Had a great time.
If you could fight anyone in the world, who would it be?
That one's a tough one. The best fight I had recently was with Ron Valder out of Penzic. He hadn't brought his shield, so we were doing a buckler fight. That was awesome.
Sounds fun. What's your favorite Penzic story?
So those two. There's the one that talked about in the bookstore, and then the one with Ron Valder. That fight was, so we were doing pickups, and I had brought everything. Ron Valder busted his shield to the buckler, so that's what we fought. We'd done like 3-4 passes, and then this was the pass, right? We found our groove, found our measure. And it is testing shots, back, forth, move, testing shots, back, forth, move. No one's landing anything, back, forth, move. We're doing that for about 3-4 minutes. And I realized this is getting no better than this. And I just stopped and shake his hand and say, that was awesome.
That's nice. All right. Who are your favorite people to watch fight?
I was trying to do some training videos this summer or this spring. People asked me to do some longsword stuff, and I tried to, okay, what was it going to show? And then I tune into Mark and go, no, I got nothing to add here.
He really has like immersed himself.
It's just gorgeous to watch.
Yeah, he's beautiful. All right. Do you have a hero in the SCA, and if so, who is it?
So, I mean, the heroes that I look to in the SCA are people like Mistress Anne, who.
So for the people not in the East, can you explain who she is and what she does?
So, I mean, Mistress Anne is a bardic laurel. She was, so I went to Penzic 25. At Penzic 25, our king Bjorn, as it turned out, turned 50. Anne became, her renown came from telling Beowulf, as it had been done, period, how to go.
Wow.
Several decades ago, right? She stood up and told the whole thing through, right? And back when people didn't think that could be done, right? Proved them wrong. At this particular Penzic, Bjorn calls her into EK Royal, and she tells about the slaying of Beowulf by the dragon. Again, the same way. And then he sends her on vigil, which was awesome. But what is great about her is her sincerity, her caring of people, and her ability to tell them when they need to hear it, how they have screwed up, and what they might consider to correct their actions, right? And that's a hard skill.
I was going to say that is a very hard skill to be able to do that in a way where people don't get offended or defensive.
Right. Yeah. When because you can't learn this sport if you're not honest with yourself, right? And that's hard to look in the mirror and say, I have fucked up.
Right.
Right.
Right. Very cool.
Yeah.
If you had to recommend one event in your kingdom for someone out of kingdom to go to, what would it be?
I'm a fan of Great Northeastern War. It's our biggest camping event. Lately, last several years, they've done, excuse me, what's the format? Sorry. They've done a very period set of passes in the full kit, right?
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and that's the day before. That's been awesome.
What month of the year is that held?
So that's July.
July. Okay. What book do you think everyone on the path to knighthood should read?
I don't have good recommendations here.
Okay, yeah. That's fine. That's fine. If you could change one thing about the SCA, what would it be?
Oh, I took a note and I talked about the silos, and that's probably the. Oh no, that's the thing I want to talk about. Yeah. Coming up, two of the two important women in the LARP that I came up with did not engage with the SCA for over a decade because of their initial interaction at a fight practice, right? And one of the things that still comes up a fair amount is a disregard for things other than the SCA, right? LARPs are less good, HEMA or that, or what have you, right? My SCA, the way I like to think about the SCA is I like to think about it as the big umbrella organization. This is a place where people from all walks of interest have a place to contribute. And however much they do or don't contribute, right, is up to them and how included they feel, right? And if somebody is doing something else, like deep historical, whatever, and that's occupying a lot of their time, that's awesome because we get the benefit of what they have to teach us, even if it's only one weekend out of a month, right? And so that's the thing. Remember, we're a big umbrella organization. Cherish what we get, what people are provided, what people are prepared to invest in us. Accept that for all it is. And hopefully, we'll be a place they want to spend more time versus less.
What do you think is the most important trait to become a successful fighter?
You got to want it. You got to be honest with yourself. And in that Sean talks about evaluation and finding deficiencies and working on them, right? And you have got to be open to understanding where the suck in your fight is, what's got to improve, right? And if you don't, you can't. And if you can't, you won't.
Right. Okay. Last question. Do you have a goal right now in the SCA? And if so, what is it?
My goal is to be able to win a crown tournament with longsword.
Very cool. Very cool.
Mark's doing it. I mean, my great grand knight did it back in the day.
Well, Mark's done it, so it is possible. And the West Kingdom list is a tough list. So
The one thing the West Kingdom list does have going for it that is favorable to it, to longsword, my understanding is that the list sizes are open.
that's true.
We often fight with a 16-foot or 20-foot square list, which is still doable, but it's a different game.
Exactly. In the West, it's just one big field, so they don't have any ropes really. So anyway,
Yep.
Thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you hanging around until you were back in country to talk to me, because I know we talked about it a long time ago. And thank everyone else for watching. I appreciate it. Tomorrow I'm talking to His Royal Majesty from Artemisia Daemon. That'll be very interesting too.
He is one of the best guys out there. He is
Yeah.
an awesome person.
Yeah, very cool person. So thanks everyone, and I will see you tomorrow. And thank you very much, Your Grace.
Thank you, Richard.